We welcome you to episode number 103 of the Primetime Rundown right here on the Eastern Observer. Our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC alongside Mike Szabo. Joey Jarzynka on hand with you. We've got a fantastic show with you tonight. It is Thursday, December 8th, and for those that are wondering why we are here on a Thursday, it's because we've completely scrapped the Friday showing of our podcast for the time being due to the fact that, Mike's got a life. We've got a life. We all have lives, but we do have a few things that have been interfering with our broadcast schedule. So, Mike, it's good to see you here on Thursday. Of course, we won't be recapping Thursday Night Football, but we will be previewing that since that is awfully close. Mike, good to see you, sir. How are things on your side of the island?
Doing well. Finals are coming up. I'm finally getting finished with all the airplane, paper airplanes and finalizing all of that for at least another month. So there's good things going on.
There you go. Very good. Yeah. There's a ton of good that has come from a lot of really in the sports world, not only today, but also this past week. There's a ton to talk about. We'll be starting off, of course, with the National Football League. We've got, our usual 5 things that we take away from the previous week and also our 5 things that we preview for week number 14. Of course, we'll be talking about our picks that we'll be making awfully soon. So it's going to be a fun night ahead of us. Of course, Major League Baseball winter meetings update. There's a ton that we have to break down. The Yankees signed Aaron Judge to a 9-year, $360 million deal. The Phillies, the Red Sox, the Rangers, the Mets, the Padres, the Cubs, the Giants, the Guardians, just a few teams to name that have been hot on the free agent market in the early going. So, Mike, let's get things started here nice and early. Of course, before we do get started, we'd like to just shout out our good friends at Black Cats NYC. They are our primary sponsor. Please check out their newest hit single, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us, and you can download that on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Pandora, and you can also hear it on every single platform that has music. So should be good there. Thank you to Andrew Giordano and for a fantastic new album that they will be coming out with awfully soon. But their single, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us, coming out or is out already. It could be played on all those platforms. So let's open this up here and let's start going into football, because there's a ton to digest and a ton to break down. Of course, Thursday Night Football, and I know our good friend Rob DeLuca is absolutely furious that we discuss Thursday Night Football in any capacity, because he just wants it gone. And Mike, tonight it's the Raiders and the Rams in a pretty garbage matchup, to be quite honest with you. But the Raiders, they're 5-7. The Rams are 3-9. We know all about the Rams, their Super Bowl hangover. It's been an absolute disaster for them. Matthew Stafford is on the shelf. Aaron Donald is on the shelf. Cooper Kupp is on the shelf. Allen Robinson has not really found his rhythm there out in Los Angeles. And then you also look on the other side, too, is that they're not really getting a lot of contributions from their rush defense. And it's really Aaron Donald or nothing. And I have a feeling that Josh Jacobs is going to absolutely feast all over the Rams. But, then you look on the home side of things and you say to yourself, well, who's the quarterback? It's John Wolford, but he's got a neck injury. So what did the Rams do? They went out and they claimed Baker Mayfield off of waivers, was just released on Monday from the Carolina Panthers. So a little bit of shakeup there in Carolina. They go with Sam Darnold, but here in Los Angeles, or rather there in Los Angeles, it's going to be Baker Mayfield, and it might just be the Baker show tonight. So let's get things started, though. Again, Raiders, Rams, what do you see here? Not much to really break down here with this one.
Yeah, I think we kind of always mention the Super Bowl hangover for the Rams and whatnot, but this still has to be one of the worst, performances of a defending Super Bowl champion, the next year and whatnot. 3-9 this year. I get injuries have played a large factor into it, but overall, it's still got to be a pretty disappointing following year after winning it all. The Raiders quietly won 3 in a row. You had obviously beat the Chargers last week, then had, the insane, Josh Jacobs overtime run against Seattle the other week. So they've quietly won 3 straight. It's quite an uphill battle to try and get into the AFC playoff picture, but hey, you got to play the games, and I think this is one that the Raiders definitely will win.
Yeah, I mean, and then again, you look at what has been going on with the Raiders. They're 5-7. They started off the season really poor, as Mike did bring up. That they've won 3 straight, and really, again, as Mike, you said it perfectly, is that it's been a quiet 3-game winning streak for them, and they've pretty much been on the back burner for a lot of these teams, especially in the AFC West too, because granted, they were. I will say this: I think they were written off. Probably about midway through the season. And since, where it's going to be week 14, there's only about a month left, or exactly a month left. Week 18 is 1 month from today, which is sickening. But they've been written off. And you look at the LA Chargers, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, and then also the Denver Broncos, too. They were written off long, long ago. And the Raiders, I thought, were going to be the team that was in dead last, or that would finish dead last. And that's not the case. It's the Broncos that are going to finish dead last. And I think the Raiders, they're going to put the Rams to 3-10, and they're doing a nice job there for they're doing a service for the Detroit Lions. And keep in mind too, the Rams they traded away that first round draft pick for this year in that Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff deal. And that has to be kept in mind too. And Mike, I saw a lot on Twitter, and Twitter is a gauntlet for tons of information, tons of people's opinions, etc. And I saw something that was written by a few Detroit Lions beat writers and fans alike, that the trade worked out for Detroit and not so much for Los Angeles. Well, hate to tell you, but that's incorrect, because it worked out for both. Because Detroit is on the uphill, and LA, they already won the Super Bowl. So you already got your ring. Granted, you may want more, but Detroit kind of got what they needed also. They got a solid quarterback that can do solid work. And then they also got some first round choices too. So now they have their own, in addition to the Rams' very high. And again, I know in football they don't do unprotected picks, but this is an unprotected pick that the Rams, or rather the Lions, are going to be absolutely capitalizing from if they make their picks right. It's so crazy to see how far down the Rams have gone, Mike. And again, we brought up about Aaron Donald. He's out for a second straight week with an ankle injury. The Raiders, Rock Ya-Sin, the cornerback, out with a knee injury, his first time that he's out this season. It's really been tough. But especially with Baker Mayfield, there's really not much that you could do. And the crazy part too is that Van Jefferson is their number 1 wide receiver right now. That I find really crazy. It's really nuts to see how Van Jefferson, he was on the shelf for a lot of weeks in the beginning of the season. Tutu Atwell was someone that, you heard about in fantasy, say, all right, keep an eye out on him. He could be a threat down the stretch. And, in a deeper league, he could potentially be someone that is draft worthy, or, pick him up off of waivers, God forbid, of an injury. And now these two players are numbers 1 and 2 and could potentially be booming, if you will, since the Raiders secondary is not that great. But, I look at the Raiders, though. They've been finding some semblance, and they've been pretty much getting the training wheels off. They have some rhythm now, Mike. And I think that that's so good to see, with the Raiders having so many expectations coming in and simply not getting it done. And now with I want to say, I guess, the disemergence, if you will, or the downfall almost. I don't even know if disemergence is a word. I don't think it is, but the downfall of the LA Chargers is pretty much imminent. And they had such a tough time against the Raiders last week, and now they have Miami at home. Back-to-back home games. I don't know if they can get it done. I don't see them getting it done. Or rather, no, sorry, the Chargers were in Las Vegas, but they're back home. And, we'll talk about that. But like I said, the Raiders just have too much offense and too much power. And now they're finally they're finally getting together when the Rams are just all over the place. Just for blank and giggles, Mike, you have a prediction for tonight with this contest, since it'll probably be a Raiders win, just a matter of what that score would be.
Yeah, I would go Raiders win 23-13.
Okay. Yeah, I would say I would probably go a little bit higher, just because of Josh Jacobs and how poor that run defense is for the Rams this season. It's been so bad that they can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass either. And they are in overall defense number 29. So the Raiders will win, but I'm going to go 27-14. 27-14 is my prediction with this game. It's so, like I said, and the big thing here is the rushing attack that the Raiders have, but they're two-dimensional because they also have Jacobs and Devontae Adams, right? Who's going to cover Devontae? Well, we know it's Jalen Ramsey, but who's going to pick up Mac Hollins on the other side? Who's going to, figure all that stuff out on the other side? Don't know how it's all going to play out. But then also, the Rams still have, if Baker can, figure things out, because probably that's what it's going to be. But, if they can get into the red zone, goal line rushes, Cam Akers will probably just run it in. And that's probably where the 2 touchdowns will come from. So since we've already gotten through that horrific game, of course, Mike, let's look back to week number 13, because week 13, obviously, there's so much to break down there from, but we will not break down all of it. There's just too much to discuss. Obviously, still week 14 is ahead of us in just a few, in about an hour and 10 minutes. Week 14 starts with that the Raiders and the Rams game. But looking back to week 13, Mike, a few things that you've taken from week 13 around the NFL that might be concerning, might possibly be a good thing for certain teams. What do you got?
Oh yeah, so last week I think starting close to home would kind of be the first New York Giants tie since 1997. Of course, that tie came again against Washington, so you
Yeah.
had the 2020 tie this weekend. And while there's a lot of goodwill about how the Giants have really overachieved expectations for this year and how they've generally played and whatnot, this was kind of a game where it kind of felt like it got away from you, especially how the second half was going. The momentum was definitely in the Giants' favor until that final drive, that big 4th down play and completion by the Commanders. And then I think Curtis Samuel getting the touchdown with like a minute left to
Yep.
send it to overtime and whatnot. So you felt like as a Giants fan, the game got a little bit away from you there. So a little bit of a negative note there. Another thing, of course, the return of Deshaun Watson to the Cleveland Browns, all the news, all the controversy around him and whatnot. He's back now. They won the first game, but I don't think you could really tell much about how he is, how his condition is in terms of playing and all that sort of stuff. We haven't seen him in so long, and that win was really built. They relied on the run. I think they would have done that either way, given it's Watson's first week back, but then it was also the Texans who, it's kind of become a meme of how much teams have decided to run against them because how bad the run defense has been this year there.
Yeah.
Another thing was, even though Jimmy Garoppolo is out for the year and he got injured in the game against Miami this past weekend, what's his name? Brock Pryor?
Brock Purdy. Mr. Irrelevant.
And they wind up winning their 4th straight, 33-17. So who knows? The 49ers defense has been playing unbelievably well. It seems like they're starting to be on a roll. They're now 8-4, leading the NFC West, heading into a big matchup with the Buccaneers, who seem to be on the upswing again.
Yep.
And Tom Brady heading to the stretch, and you never know, all that sort of stuff. So pretty intriguing matchup coming up this weekend. Von Miller out for the year with the ACL. Massive, massive blow for a really up and down Buffalo Bills team.
Yeah.
And, the Cincinnati Bengals taking down Kansas City at home. And a little bit of a shock could be of a big playoff preview.
You brought up so you brought up 4 out of my 5 top things from week 13. You know, Mike, you bring up the fact that it's funny with Jimmy G, right? And we had on Kyle Madsen in the beginning of the season, right? And that was poor preparation on my part, where I had said that Trey Lance, by the time week 4 rolls around, he would not be the starter anymore. But obviously, I didn't say it was because of injury. I just said because of performance. Not the case. Week 3, he goes down. Jimmy G comes in. 11 weeks later, here we are. Now it's Brock Purdy's time. Mr. Irrelevant 2022 draft from Iowa State. St. John's fans know all about Iowa State. He still went, Brock Purdy, that is, 25 of 37, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception, was sacked 3 times by the defense of Miami. Now, you look at what San Francisco has ahead, Mike, and this is a little scary, right? You bring up about Tampa Bay, who just had a phenomenal win, by the way. We'll get to that in a few short moments. Then you've got at Seattle. They take on Washington. They go to Las Vegas. And really, their only slam dunk right now of a win is when they host Arizona in week number 18. Things have gotten a little bit iffy out in the NFC West, because now without Jimmy G, it's awfully tough, because now you can't really gauge what this San Francisco offense is going to do. You know what their defense is going to do. They're lights out. But what can the offense do? Because you still have Christian McCaffrey. You still have Deebo Samuel that can be, very, very, very volatile in all facets of that offense. And we brought up how they still have Seattle, which is a crucial game in week number 15, where they go to Seattle. That could potentially decide who might have bragging rights in the NFC West. Because that game at Lumen Field is going to be one heck of a battle. They're one game in front. San Francisco is. They're 8-4. They've won 5 straight. Seattle is 7-5. They won their most recent game on Sunday. You brought up also about Cincinnati, right? You brought up about them. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I think Cincinnati is back, and they have now hit their stride. And and people may not agree with me at all. I believe that they can compete. Keyword is compete with the Buffaloes and the Kansas Cities. They did it last year. They beat Kansas City 3 times this calendar year. 3 times. Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, we've said this in a ton of podcasts that we've done, in a ton of shows that we've done. How hard is it to take down a team 3 times? So hard. And they did it. Now, how hard is it to take down a team a 4th consecutive time? I don't know. I think that's even harder, obviously. But Cincinnati, listen, Joe Burrow, 25 of 31, 286 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I think the biggest momentum shift in favor of Cincinnati, Mike, was in the 2-minute drill, right? Or that's kind of the 2-minute drill, if you will, or in the final 3 minutes, right? Or 2.5 minutes, give or take, right? It was that 14-yard pass on 3rd and long to T. Higgins that solidified the game. Now you're going up against a Super Bowl contender, a perennial defense. I'll use that word lightly when it comes to Kansas City. But they have a tough defense. Mm-hmm. And a 14-yard dart on 3rd and long, when, you probably could have punted it away or whatever, but you went for that kill. You went for the kill shot, and they got it. They got it. Now, that does wonders for your confidence, for your locker room, not only for just this upcoming game, it's for the next few. It's down the stretch, because you look back and say to yourself, well, the AFC favorites we just took down because they simply couldn't get things going. But again, this is what Joe Burrow does, and he does this on a weekly basis. And now he's got Jamar Chase back, and he's got T. Higgins. He's got the whole wide receiver room. He's still waiting for Joe Mixon to come back. But I think they're back. I really believe it. I think that they are back. And you brought up about Buffalo. Boy, do I agree with you. Boy, do I agree with you. You have to realize also, for the folks that don't know, Josh Allen's elbow is not 100%.
Mm.
And that defense is very, very vulnerable without Von Miller. They did get Tre'Davious White back. That's great. But they're still missing a key part of their secondary who was out for the whole year, who got hurt in week number 1, Micah Hyde. Jordan Poyer is back. But Micah Hyde's missing the whole season. Now, we remember last year that secondary for Buffalo was almost unstoppable. They were one of the best secondaries in all of football. Now it's the Chiefs' turn, because Buffalo, they're missing their primary run stopper for starters, and also Von Miller, who is a crucial guy in the locker room, a crucial guy on the field. He's your signal caller on the field too. It's tough, and I'll be honest with you. This game, we'll get to that in a moment, but this game, Mike, this weekend against the Jets, a lot of people thought in the beginning of the season, when you look probably back, people thought when you look at the calendar way, way down the road that, it's the Jets. Easy win, whatever the case is. Far from it. We'll get to that in a moment. I wrote down here, and a few of my notes here too. I wrote down also how these are the two things that you did not say, Mike. So I'm glad that you didn't say that. Otherwise, we would have been on the next topic already. But I love the Jets. I love what Robert Saleh has done with this team. Zach Wilson is gone. There is no doubt in my mind. He is gone. Mm-hmm. There is no coming back from what we've seen in the last 2 games. None. And if there is, I'd be very surprised, and I believe it would be coming down from ownership, which I don't really think Woody Johnson would want a cancer in his locker room after so many years of not only negativity, but also just mediocre football.
Yeah, I think if he never made those comments in the press conference, it would have been a totally different situation, because at the end of the day, you would have, if you never had that press conference, or he never said those comments, you would have been talking about a young quarterback who's hit a bad stretch. Because frankly, before he's gotten benched, he was 5-2 this season.
Yep.
Fair, good flashes in his young career. 19 games in the NFL, and you've seen a lot of good things, and they've had a positive year overall, the Jets. But then he makes that kind of comment. A lot of players seem to be, rubbed the wrong way really about him. And you can't have a lack of accountability at a position that really demands it. And so much in football is predicated around the leadership and the excellence of playing the quarterback and playing that position. And so if you have a locker room cancer, or someone who you're starting to have doubts about their leadership skills, their accountability, and whatnot, not going to last long in that team, or who knows, the NFL. Like, Zach Wilson's in a little bit of a scary position. We mentioned this a couple weeks back, and it's I don't know how long his future is beyond this season with the Jets. But listen, they found something with Mike White. I started to combine Micah Hyde and Mike White there. Mike White, they found a little bit of something there. They've been fairly competitive. Obviously, the big win against Chicago, and then you had, even though they lost to Minnesota, they were competitive there. And other than whatever that game was in New England, where I don't know what Zach Wilson woke up with that day, but the throws he was missing. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
completely with you there. I don't see him lasting too much longer.
They also put on a show in Minnesota. They put on a show, Mike. They lost 27-22, but they made it a fun 27-22 loss. There was a time when the defense of the Jets was a laughingstock. And now the Jets defense is looking a lot like what Robert Saleh had transformed the San Francisco defense into. And oddly enough, there's one player that Robert Saleh has had a lot of history with that made a key tackle in that game. Quan Alexander, formerly with San Francisco, then with New Orleans, and then signed a deal to play with his old defensive coordinator with the Jets. Quan Alexander made a crucial third down stop that eventually forced the Vikings to punt the ball away. That gave the Jets one final signal of life. Now, granted, they were not able to capitalize, but the bottom line, though, is that they're getting contributions from everybody, and that is so key, and which is why also they're 8-4. Or I'm sorry, 7-5. Excuse me, 7-5. But that's the point. The point, though, Mike, is that they're getting contributions from every single player, and it seems also is that every soul has bought in to what Robert Saleh has been selling. It's so key.
I wonder, when was the last time the Jets did the double in a year over any team in the division? Because that's up for grabs this weekend in Buffalo. So I wonder, when was the last time that was done? Because I feel like that's been unheard of, and especially on a team like Buffalo, the last few years with Josh Allen have been so good. It's crazy that you're even talking about this about the Jets. Usually they're the ones, they're taking the losses, they're the punching bag and whatnot. They might do the double over Buffalo this year, and in preseason I was unthinkable.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and when you bring up about the unthinkable, I think it's even unheard of for the Jets to even win more than 4 or 5 games. Mike, I don't know what the over-under was with Jets winning this year. I do know, obviously, since you're a Giants fan and DeLuca's a Giants fan and Ian's a Giants fan as well, we don't talk a lot about the Jets in our, outside of this, our show. But that over-under with the Giants was 5.5. So I would say the Jets were probably just a little bit lower. But be that as it may, 7 wins, 5 losses. Again, this is something that we've brought up. They're playing with house money. They've got a really bright future ahead. And the same thing goes with the Giants, too. Tom Brady still has it. Mike, we said this. I don't even know how much more you could say. Like, this man has proven everything. Everything, Mike. 2-minute drill. Pretty much, it was really a 3-minute drill. He had 1 timeout plus the 2-minute warning. Comes back with 2 touchdowns to beat the Saints. Now, listen, as an Eagles fan, I'm happy because we own the Saints' first-round pick for 2023. And it's going to be, it looks like, a top 5 pick. But 36 for 54, 281 yards and 2 touchdowns. This man still has it. And he put the entire Buccaneers organization on his back and beat the entire Saints organization in 2 fell swoops. And my last one, Todd Bowles is not fit to be a head coach. Not fit to be a head coach. 6-6, there's a lot of things that I believe that if you look in that locker room today, former Jets players would see some similarities. When he was at the helm of the Jets, I believe that you might see some similarities there in that locker room compared to the other one up here in New Jersey at the time. Again, those are strong words, and that's just pure speculation. So I don't know exactly what's going on down there. And I do believe also that Tom Brady's divorce also had a little bit to do with it. There's no doubt about it. A little bit, right? But now this is the first time this season that you're seeing Tom do this. This is the first time that he took whatever, but it's also the way the team performs too. And they haven't been performing well at all. At all. It's not ideal, but now we can look kind of into week 14. And I would say, Mike, my biggest one here is San Francisco and Tampa.
Yeah.
Because Tom is now going to San Francisco to play one of the toughest defenses in all of the NFC, or really all of the NFL. And he's going up against a team that has very high expectations and playoff hopes. But now they are down their 2 quarterbacks. Now it's Mr. Irrelevant. Is Mr. Irrelevant going to really take down the greatest of all time? It's possible. But that defense for San Francisco, Mike.
It's going to be a really tight, low-scoring affair. Even though the Buccaneers have wound up winning a lot of the, 3 of their last 4 or something like that, they wind up winning. Not exactly convincing, and it's not exactly by high scores. So it's not like, oh my God, night and day, the Buccaneers offense is clicking left and right. No, that's not the case. They've been winning rock fights the last month. And that's going to be the same case this weekend. It's going to be another rock fight. Defense is going at it, probably like a 16-13 game or something like that. It's going to be a real struggle. But it's going to be really interesting because these are 2 teams, even though the Buccaneers are 6-6, they're at the top of their division. So they basically took a page out of last year's NFC East and have turned into it this year. The NFC South is just ridiculously bad. And then either way, they're 2 teams that are top of their division, trending in the right direction. What's going to give this weekend? It's, underdog, like you said, Mr. Irrelevant against the greatest of all time quarterback matchup. It's really interesting. So I think probably just to preview things, I'm going to go with the ballsy pick and that the 49ers might wind up winning. Not like I said, take the score that I threw out there, 16-13, something like that. Because that 49ers defense, they are rolling right now. They are doing so well. And while the Buccaneers have picked up wins, they haven't exactly convinced me of a lot of things offensively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's key. That is 100% key. But they are getting healthier. But that offensive line is struggling. Donovan Smith leads the way. The team's left tackle is leading the way in false start penalties throughout the entire league. Brutal. He's leading the way in penalties as an offensive lineman in the league.
Especially this time of year, it's brutal.
Yeah, real brutal. And they thought that they could get him under wraps. They simply can't do it. You're still seeing there are so many different plays that we got a chance to see on Monday Night Football where he nearly blew the team's chances of getting their win. But he eventually came back, thanks in whole to Tom Brady. Another week 14, 5 things for me here. I really want to know how Deshaun Watson is going to play against a red-hot Cincinnati Bengals team. You look, Mike, and you say to yourself, from that game against Houston, right? He was very, very rusty. Now, again, he's human, did not play 700-plus days, right? So he was 12 for 22, 131 yards, 1 interception. It was the defense and the special teams that got it done for Cleveland. 21 of the team's 27 points came from either a fumble recovery, came from an interception, a pick 6, or simply just a kickoff return for a touchdown. 21 points out of the team's 27 came from defense and special teams. The other 6, a pair of field goals. That was it. There was not much offense. You simply did not see it. 12 for 22, but again, they're trying to ease him back in. But if the defense did not come through and the special teams didn't come through, we'd be having a completely different conversation. And it's very hard to gauge, similar to the Brock Purdy situation, how Deshaun Watson is going to play against a rejuvenated Cincinnati Bengals defense. Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, the list goes on over there. And they're playing in Cincinnati too. That's another thing too. They're playing in Cincinnati. Really difficult to see them getting a win. But again, this is pretty much a wash here for Cleveland. They need to wipe everything, put it underneath, and you're good. Detroit, Mike, I think they might play spoiler against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it. Now, I think that what the Lions have brought to this season is not only a lot of, I don't want to call it baggage, right? Because we know what they've had for so many years, which is terrible luck, brutal football play, brutal coaching, brutal playing, and they simply do not look like an NFL team. They look like an AFL team. The Lions now are 5-7. They just got back Jameson Williams, who, mind you, was used as a gunner last week on special teams. Now, before we move on here, I'll echo what Howie Long said. I'll echo what other folks have said throughout football. Why would you use a player, a young kid, mind you, and a rookie making his NFL debut? Why would you use him as a gunner on special teams when he just came back from a blown out ACL?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're running your hardest. You're all over the place. You're pretty much a free runner the whole time. Wouldn't you use him in specific packages only? I mean, you have to ease him back in, but the Detroit Lions simply cannot get out of their own way. Granted, they are 5-7. Things are on the uphill swing for them. And I think also that this is a team playing inside Ford Field in that domed stadium that could potentially trap this Minnesota Vikings team. I mean, hey, listen, Minnesota almost lost to the New York freaking Jets inside their building. Why can't Detroit do it, Mike? Can they do it? What do you see with that? I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've seen this year the Lions have the potential to put up a lot of points. They've been in some big time shootouts this year. They just put up 40 points this past week against Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So there's been flashes. They've looked really good. Jamal Williams has been fantastic with that rushing attack. Amon St. Brown, it's been clicking. Jared Goff has been a hit in Detroit. Like you said, they've been on an upward swing. We always know in the NFL, divisional games are always tough. They always sneak up on you sometimes. I could definitely see it. They could play spoiler.
Yeah, I like I said, I will be 100% honest with you. I really believe that this game, aside from the Jets-Buffalo game, could be the number 2 game of the week. I really do. And again, I'm speaking to this as an Eagles fan because both Mike and myself, we're Eagles and Giants fans respectively. So this weekend's game is very big for the both of us. But we look at it as non-biased outsiders that this is going to be a fantastic weekend of football. And you also look at a team that is struggling mightily Mike, on the other side of things, the LA Chargers need to win in the worst way possible, because then they'll be one game under 500. Right now, they're sitting at 6-6. They are playing Miami, though, who they're coming off of a loss to San Francisco up in the Bay. There's so much offense, but there's also so much defense. I don't see the Chargers getting this win on Sunday Night Football. And mind you, this game was flexed. This game was flexed in because Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Mike Gesicki, Jeff Wilson Jr., Bradley Chubb, Elandon Roberts, Xavier Howard, the list goes on.
Yeah, Miami can be tough to gauge sometimes. Sometimes they take some boneheaded losses, or this season they've had some boneheaded performances. But I mean, there's so much talent there on the offensive end. They've looked really good this year. I don't think, as much as people would make fun of Tua about the underthrown passes, or a receiver would be completely wide open and he can't get the pass to him. His arm wouldn't be there in that situation, and the ball would fall like onto the grass like 5-10 yards short of the guy. And or whether that was in a real game or that was in practice, like there would be all sorts of oh my gosh, look at Tua, he's so accurate. Oh, look at Tua, he's so great, and this and that. He's been really good this year, and I think in part it's gone a little bit underrated. We've seen how good it's done for young quarterbacks to pair them with a big time receiver. Look how much Philly has taken a jump this year just adding AJ Brown. Yeah, sure, there's other stuff added in and whatnot, but primarily there's certain resurgences because of AJ Brown. And adding Tyreek Hill to Miami, it's been absolutely fantastic there. They're 8-4, but like I said, sometimes they take some weird losses and whatnot, weird performances. But even though they're on the road, we always, make the joke, how much of it, is it really on the road being in SoFi Stadium?
Oh yeah.
With the Chargers or the Rams. And the Chargers, they've just been so weird on defense, a lot of defensive injuries and whatnot. They've really underperformed expectations. So yeah, I agree. I think Miami will definitely get the win on Sunday Night Football, and they really need it. There's no margin for error really in the AFC East. Especially, I mean, even though the Patriots are 500 at 6-6, like that division is pretty tight.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the same thing goes with now all of a sudden when you look at the AFC West on the flip side of the country. The AFC West from really 1 through 3 is pretty tight as well. Or maybe just 2 and 3, if you will, between the Raiders and the Chargers, because all of a sudden now the Chargers are 6-6 and the Raiders are 5-7. Right now, the Chargers are on the outside looking in, but if the Chargers lose, the Raiders could potentially be in the hunt, and they could make some sort of rhythm moving down the stretch. And again, it's only week 14, right? And I want to say only because it's not like it's week 17, so there's, such a small margin for error. There still is a small margin for error, but the margin of error is not one game. You still have maybe 1 to 2, not 3, but you've got 2. It gets tighter as we go. Next week, week 15, it'll be even tighter. And then week 18 will probably, I'm sure something will be figured out that way in the West. But you brought up a perfect point too, is that the new players that have come in, Mike McDaniel, also the new head coach for the Dolphins. Not only a phenomenal job, Mike, I feel like there was a key that needed to be turned a certain way to unlock Tua Tagovailoa, and he was the perfect man for it. He went to the perfect locksmith and said, all right, how do I do this? He gave him the right key, and boom, it's exactly what they did. And I'm not even saying him, I'm saying the Dolphins. They needed a perfect locksmith to unlock him, and Mike McDaniel was that guy. And they did exactly that. What a job that he's done with the whole team. And the Dolphins, once again, they're in full buy-in mode and they're buying everybody. I mean, look, you just you short up the linebacking core with Bradley Chubb plus a 5-year contract extension too. So there's just so many good things on defense. And they're doing all of this also without their number 2 cornerback in Byron Jones too. We remember him. We haven't heard that name in quite a while. So Xavier Howard, he's pretty much locking down that wide receiver 1 on the other side. And then you look at the wide receiver 1 on the offensive side of things, and boy, is Tyreek Hill doing what a job. What a job he's doing. And that offensive line in Miami has taken a little bit of a beating, but they are shoring it up left and right. They just signed Eric Fisher also, since the right tackle Austin Jackson went on season-ending injured reserve. So a lot of good things, Mike. Any others that you see that I did not speak of?
Well, we lightly touched on it. I think this would take a couple of slots in my top 5 is how big of a divisional week it is.
Yeah.
We mentioned about the Jets, Bills, Browns, Bengals. So some really intriguing divisional battles. Who would have thought the Eagles and Giants game would have been of some sort of consequence this year? Certainly on the Giants side of things. And, I think Philly's going to definitely win easily. I sorry to say that as a Giants fan, but it's true. They haven't looked good. And I think they've hit such a rough stretch in the schedule. And, now I think will be a little bit of a reality check for where the Giants are. But still, in terms of the standings, still quite a game of consequence. The Giants have kind of been like the lottery sometimes this year. You never know.
That's good.
So it's an intriguing game. And, the Chiefs Broncos is kind of very light on the divisional games kind of thing. The Broncos, massive disappointment this year.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of really intriguing. Ravens Steelers, nobody mentions.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty intriguing battle there. So, big sort of divisional week. Always is as we head toward the stretch run of the regular season, but some really key battles there. Teams vying to try and secure their division or try and pull the other one back down a little bit closer to them and whatnot. So, so pretty interesting week there. We mentioned the Buccaneers and the Niners, and then, of course, Seattle with the game they should win against Carolina, but a game that you need. You want to really go ahead into that game against San Francisco next week with a game up and you're home, because otherwise you have a loss this week and, could potentially be a little bit of steam taken out of the sail.
Did you see what Ben McAdoo said today about Geno Smith? He is Team Geno, and he said how, he sees a few things that Geno has done, that he did in New York, that he's doing now in Seattle, and he said that, he's really happy for him and everything like that. And I completely forgot that Ben McAdoo was still in the league. He's the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. So I didn't believe that. I didn't even realize that he was still in football. I really didn't. And I know Giants fans never want to hear that name ever again. But I mean, hey, listen, he was the one that ended the run for Eli Manning, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, absolutely. You see. Know how to get under a Giants fan's skin? Always bring up Ben McAdoo alongside Eli Manning. That is how you do it. So let's finish off our football segment, Mike, because, of course, we get to the segment where everyone wants to know about not only how we did, but also our upcoming picks for week number 14. So let us take a peek and look back to week number 13. So it was a perfect week with the exception of our good friend Evan Winter from We Are A to Z Sports, or A to Z Sports rather. He decided to potentially go with the upset with Houston over Cleveland. Everyone else decided to play safe. I mean, the Essential Wrestling Podcast squad, though, Mike, they went all in and put every single chip that they had on the poker table on the Dallas Cowboys. It eventually worked out, obviously. In the second half, it was 33 points in the second half alone. But What a week. What a week that was. And now the primetime rundown is that crew, Larry, LP, DeLuca, Ian, you, Evan, and Casey are 51-27 and ahead of the Essential Wrestling Podcast group, 47-31, up by 4 games. So, as you can see, LP and DeLuca are carrying you guys, but Mike and Evan are in 4th, so 7-6, but we'll have to see. Does Mike go over two games? Does he go 2 games over 500 with his week 14 pick? Who is that pick going to be, Mike?
So I've been tossing between a couple. I know we joked off air. I almost wind up double picking again. So I wind up checking my picks before the show and whatnot. I keep on triple checking as we go through this show.
That's
Just to
right.
make sure I don't double pick again, because that would be really bad. I'll get reamed by DeLuca most out of anybody.
That's correct.
So I'll just be haunted in my sleep and having the voice of DeLuca in all caps. What are you doing? So tossing between a few. As much as they've looked very uneven this season, they seem to always dominate their division pretty well. I'm taking the Tennessee Titans over the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, I will tell you this much, and you can take a peek on what I've got. I've got the Tennessee Titans as well. And again, for those that don't know also, me and Mike are on 2 separate teams. So for those that might say, or as Rob DeLuca would say, collusion, that is not the case here. So Tennessee Titans, that's who I've got left, and it's getting harder and harder as we go along. And for those folks that know Survivor pools, it gets harder and harder as you go along. And especially in the final few weeks of the season, it gets even harder, especially when you have certain notes and certain, potential, all right, well, this team's going to be terrible the whole year. Let's choose them. But we already chose them in week 1. So Tennessee over Jacksonville. Keep in mind also, Mike, you brought it up too. They've been very uneven. They've been uneasy as well. Traylon Burks got hurt against the Eagles in a very dirty hit against Marcus Epps back on Sunday. And I really believe that they will bounce back. Tennessee should win easily in that contest against Jacksonville. Doug Peterson, the former Eagles coach in Jacksonville, doing a fine job, but Tennessee is just too powerful against this Jacksonville team.
Yeah,
so
just hand the ball to Derrick Henry and don't think twice. The
That's
Jacksonville run defense is absolutely god-awful this year.
Exactly right. So Tennessee over Jacksonville, we both have that in the bag. So Mike, let us move forward here and let's go to Major League Baseball, because I'm sure that is what a ton of folks have tuned in for and whatever, just because a lot of the Yankees fans and Yankees faithful, us being one, the Yankees re-signed Aaron Judge to a 9-year, $360 million deal. So, Mike, I'll start with you. There's a lot of grievances that I believe have to be aired out here tonight, whether it be regarding FIFA, whether it be regarding, the U.S. Soccer Federation, which we'll get to later on. But there's a lot of mixed reviews here when it comes to Aaron Judge. And I think a lot has to do with the new Steinbrenner regime. It's not the old Steinbrenner regime. It's not the Uncle Steve of Steve Cohen regime. It is this brand new look New York Yankees ownership that is led by Hal Steinbrenner, who has come out publicly and said over the years that he will not spend the way his father did.
Yeah, so we've seen that even though he said that, I will give Hal credit that he sometimes makes exceptions. We've seen it in the Stanton trade where he's willing to take on a boatload of money. We've seen it where he threw an absolute bag to Garrett Cole. Obviously, the jury's still out whether the contract is, whether Cole fleeced him or not. He has, he's had up and down performances, et cetera, et cetera. And now, of course, with Judge and saying, here's $40 million. Here, I'll give you the extra year to bump you up to a 9-year contract, all that sort of stuff. I will give him credit. He shows willingness, and he shows a tendency to spend at times. Um, but I'm always hesitant to seriously give him a lot of credit because you want to see what the rest of the Yankee offseason is. Because you felt like they had to keep Judge. Because everybody throwing all the flowers and roses at Hal Steinbrenner and whatnot. I mean, what would have been the optics toward him if you let him walk? As much as everybody wants to say, oh, well, years 7, 8, and 9, look at Judge's age, years 7, 8, and 9, riddled with injuries, the contract's going to be an albatross, et cetera, et cetera. That would have been true for any team, and you have to take the risk. He's an absolutely special talent. He had an unbelievably fantastic year this past year, breaking Maris's home run record. You have to take the risk. And he basically did the bare minimum for his ownership. Judge makes so much money for this team. He's so marketable. You have a section of the stadium after him. It's sort of, as much as I want to credit him, it's sort of the bare minimum that you had to do to keep this team on the general trajectory that you want them to the next few years. Judge was so essential, especially in that second half, to them maintaining the division and getting and staying in the playoffs. And then, of course, but the other part is if it's Judge as the only major addition, you're kind of going to be disappointed. So that's why I'm saying you still got to let the offseason play out, because otherwise it's just the same team. Yes, it's fantastic. Judge is back. How valuable he was last year and everything, but this Yankees team still probably needs a left fielder, another bat there. You'd love to say 2, but that's getting greedy with how sometimes they like to operate, and plus you can get that internally if they decide to finally play the kids. So yeah, I definitely would want to see where they go. There's always the argument about spreading the money around, but Judge was just so important in that second half. He's so important to this team and so marketable. Big contract, but you felt like it had to get done.
Yeah, I look at it from 2 ways. And the first side of it, obviously, is that he's a fan favorite, right? And in the second half, because we know how poorly the Yankees did in the month of August, how poorly they did after starting the season off 30 games over 500. There were some shades of 1998 in the beginning of the season. And we said this, Mike, and I remember a few times we brought that up. And, I remember you had laughed at me a few times, like in July when they started to go downhill. But in the beginning, we were discussing it. We were saying, if this team stays on that path and on the road before the train kind of, went off the tracks badly, there were some solid, positive thoughts of, this team could just run away with it. Not the case. The tracks broke off. The train drove off the tracks and went into the mountains and absolutely crashed. And then they had to put it back together and then move forward. That's what they had to do. Mm-hmm. They did it. They got things together again in late September. And Aaron Judge was a big reason why. But when you look at the other side of things and you say to yourself, well, there's still Josh Donaldson, there's still Gleyber Torres, there's still Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. You still have a lot of issues. Oh, I'm sorry. I also forgot to add Aaron Hicks, too. You've got a lot of money and a lot of control tied up in these guys. Mainly the latter two, in Donaldson and Hicks. That's about a combined $25 to $30 million that you can potentially spread out, right? So, Mike, I know we brought this up today, you and I, that, if you trade away a Josh Donaldson, if you trade away an Aaron Hicks, that's great. Who's going to take that on, though? That's the problem, right? So if you were to trade that away and not sign Aaron Judge, you conceivably have about $70 million to play with, right? Give or take 70, right? 65, $70 million you could play with, right? So you can go after a Trey Turner. You could have gone after a Trey Turner and you could have potentially traded for a Brian Reynolds.
They could still do that technically.
They can, but and I don't know how long he's got control for. I
3
don't
years.
know. He's got another 3 years left. Okay, so he still has solid control before he will get pretty much the bank bag thrown at him as well, because he's another special talent that, well, I was gonna say Pittsburgh probably would want to hold on to him, but because when you have the player pretty much request the trade, that's when you know that Pittsburgh is in deep doo-doo. I would call Brian Reynolds potentially the best player that Pittsburgh has seen since Andrew McCutchen. I mean, that's pretty high praise. But going back to the point, though, with Aaron Judge, though, right? And you brought up the marketing part, so I won't bring that in there again. I'll bring up the other side of it. You want to talk, you spoke about spreading out the wealth. That is why I said, and I said this to multiple people, I wouldn't have cared if the Yankees did not re-sign Judge, because you can now shore up the bullpen when you have a lot of question marks, right? Sure, you have Ron Marinaccio, who really turned out to be fantastic. Michael King, who was kind of the anchor to that bullpen, a quiet anchor, broke his elbow against Baltimore back last July. All right, remember that? And that was when the wheels fell off, right? From that game, Mike, we remember that. Yep. That game, the wheels fell off. Zach Britton, I don't think he was really a factor. You can't really include him in there. Aroldis Chapman, not really a factor down the stretch. Can't really include him.
I don't even want to hear those names again.
Hold on, though. But see, that thing, though, right, is that Aroldis Chapman, though, for most of the season, he was on the roster. So you have to now replace him there, too, right? Clay Holmes, right? Question mark, because, was he a flash in the pan? Was he a one-year wonder? Now, we don't know. Now, you brought up off camera about how pitching coach Matt Blake, there should be really no problem with that, right? But they signed again Tommy Kahnle, who was a fantastic addition a couple of years ago when they traded for him from Chicago. He was good. Now they bring him back after Tommy John surgery, so that's a nice thing. Again, question marks in the bullpen. How does it happen? And how do these pitchers play out in really year number 2 when there's a lot of question marks, when you need someone that could potentially be that anchor, when Michael King is probably going to be out for much of 2023, if not all of it? That's the thing that scares me, Mike. And one more thing, because I want to get your counter, is that the left fielder, right? We saw what Oswaldo Cabrera did. You put him in. He is the Ben Zobrist of this team. Put him in left field. You could even put him into right field, whatever. You also used Giancarlo Stanton and used him as the everyday left fielder and put Oswaldo Cabrera in right. Whatever it was. So I get the marketing aspect, but I also look and say to myself, well, this is not a George Steinbrenner run team. This is his kids' team that doesn't want to spend to the top and go to the third tier of the luxury tax like how Steve Cohen is doing over the Throgs Neck Bridge. Mike, your counter.
I think here's part of it. In terms of the spending, let's go on that first. And like I was talking about with the exceptions that Hal gives, I think there's starting to be a loosening, right? They had a pretty high payroll last year. I think they may make some subtractions and whatnot, but I still think their final payroll is going to be pretty high than compared to what we've seen in some recent years, or some tendencies of them wanting to keep on going back and forth underneath the luxury tax and whatnot. So I think they may be pressing a little bit more, or that seems to be the conversation than years past, maybe being more reserved and things like that. Here's my thing about spreading the money around. The start of the offseason, they always made the demand, and you wouldn't have wanted them to say anything else, that Judge was a priority. Re-signing Judge was a priority. And you saw the timeline of how things were going. The decision was made and whatnot, they wouldn't have been. You would be in the position where he would have gone. Let's say he would have gone to San Francisco or San Diego and whatnot. What would they have done? Trey Turner had been signed. Um, you know, Bogarts, by the time he got signed after Judge, but obviously the wheels were way in motion. Whenever that was coming in last night or something like that. The backups, the backup options were all getting signed away. And I doubt the Yankees would have just, a guy who had just won, the MVP, 62 home runs, had been so vital that they were just going to leave him on red most of the offseason. And just, oh, okay, see you later. That was never going to happen. So as much as there's the spread the money around argument and all that sort of stuff, they clearly made him a priority from the get-go, and the backup options went away sort of quickly. So if they would have went that approach, they would be standing here today in a much, much, much precarious position. And yeah, they would have a lot of money to spend on things, but what are you looking at? Okay, $15 million for an Andrew Benintendi. Then are you turning to the pitching side, or now it's the trade market? Things get sort of murkier of who's going to hit. Not exactly getting slam dunk guys and all that sort of stuff. So I think the conversation would have been a lot more murkier of where you were going to move. And given this front office's history and my grievances with Cashman at times, I don't know how much confidence I would have had of spreading things around with the options that they had and whatnot. The other part about the bullpen that I'll counter with, like I said, I think.
And Mike, before you get to that, a live look of Mike heading to the bullpen right now to chat about that. So go on here. Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean the bullpen. Ever since Matt Blake has come in as pitching coach, he's done really well. And yeah, we always make the conversation of how influential bench coaches or managers have on the game of baseball now and whatnot. It's pretty apparent. Like the pitching rotation, whether that's the starters or the bullpen, have always been fairly stable. The reasons that the Yankees have failed the last couple of years is not because of pitching on either end. And you have to give credit, Wandy Peralta and whatnot, they were still stringing the outs together throughout the playoffs. It's really the reason why they've been failing is the offense going cold. So while I think they need a pitcher, maybe you have a little bullpen trade to kind of shore things up. You'll probably see something in mid-January, something like that as the market kind of sizzles down and guys are still looking for jobs or people are looking to shift salaries, all that sort of stuff. Maybe they work something out where they get a little setup man out of nowhere.
Like a Clay Holmes from Pittsburgh.
Something like that. It's always there's always stable returns, and I think here's the thing. I think the biggest question is what their closer is. If you have to put a question on the bullpen, they have a lot of collection of good relievers, good setup men, and whatnot. But who's really going to step into that closer role? I like Jonathan Loaizinga there. I think it flew really under the radar how good he was after he came back from injury to end off the year. I forget what the numbers were, but I can't remember him having really that bad of a performance from August down into the end of the year. I don't think there was a situation where he did that badly. Wandy Peralta was fantastic. And I think Holmes, as much as he fell apart in the second half, wasn't as good of a closer as he was absolutely lights out in the first. His role is probably being his best being an eighth inning setup role. So I think if you have Holmes as the eighth inning guy, Loaizinga as the, hey, we need 4 outs out of you, or just be the closer. I think it's maybe a year behind schedule, but I think we finally see him move into that sort of role. And I think they figure out a way to piece it. There are a lot of names and whatnot that are there. So I think there's depth in terms of the amount of arms that they could throw out there, the amount of options if everybody stays healthy. And I think they'll wind up piecing it together. That's on the lower totem pole of my concerns. The Yankees have always been strong with building bullpen pieces. It's like a factory line. They wind up putting that together. The concern really, Jamison Tyone has left. They need a
Yeah.
starter as badly as they need another offensive back to go along with the re-signing of Judge.
So you brought up about Jamison Tyone, but before we get to that, though, just want to finish off with Aaron Judge. For those that do not know or did not remember or anything along those lines, Aaron Judge personally called Hal Steinbrenner and said, "What would it take to get to 9 years?" And Hal Steinbrenner himself, 9 years, added an additional few $1 million there. He had an offer from San Francisco on the table. And for those that do not know also, he flew down to San Diego because San Diego was going to pitch him a 10-year, $40 million, $400 million offer. They were going to do that. And the entire time, from what it seemed, and especially from that phone call, Aaron Judge wanted to remain in New York. There was no doubt about it, I think, in his mind. I believe that he was going to remain in New York either way.
Which is kind of crazy, given how the rumors were going, right? The news was totally going the opposite way. Whether it was the jumping the gun tweet about he's headed to the Giants and all that sort of stuff, or whether it was the rumors beforehand about he's looking for a place in San Francisco, or like random people on Yankees Twitter just getting blocked left and right by Judge and his Twitter page, or the nuggets about how he was displeased with the fans booing him and the playoff drought that he was having and all that sort of stuff. So all the conversation was really sliding negative. Yeah. And then once the signing happened and we hear of how it happened and whatnot, we're like, it really was, the guy took less money in the sense of years or something like that, to stay a Yankee. And it seemed like it was never in huge danger that he was going anywhere, despite the reports.
Yeah, and the only player that was signed by the Giants that night, right? That we heard about all of that was Mr. Arson Judge. Arson Judge, he was signed there. He's headed to the Giants. It's what it is, man. It's like, I gotta tell you, John Heyman is after that, he was close to being Bob Nightingale. Very close. And I think a lot of people wanted his head on a platter.
Do you know the Yes Network put up that tweet in the video of like, oh, Aaron Judge, how long of a week Aaron Judge has been having between jumping on Monday Night Football and then the winter meetings and hashing out this deal and whatnot. They literally put up the misspelled tweet, the Arson Judge.
That's right.
That's right. For the Giants.
Now we'll tell. Yeah.
Even though the spelling error was fixed, even though obviously the general message of the tweet wind up being wrong, still everybody will never forget the legend that was Arson Judge.
Oh, of course, that is something that will never ever go away. That's for sure. So let's look around Major League Baseball. There's so many signings that occurred, and obviously it was not Aaron Judge's deal that sparked all of these signings, Mike. It was Jacob deGrom in Texas that spurred the Mets, and he signed a 5-year, $185 million deal with a no-trade clause and 2028 club option that could show that 6th year to bring up that number all the way to $223 million. Now, obviously, we're not going to, we'll go through we won't go through every single one. We'll read every single one. But, with deGrom, though, because it has to do with the Mets, I want to just touch upon this, Mike. And, there were some reasons that we won't discuss on the show about, there's a lot of rumors going around and no one can really pinpoint what it was that he wanted to leave New York. I think we all have an idea, but sticking to baseball for a moment, 5 years, $185 million deal. This is a massive high risk, high reward deal for Texas. And the Mets, obviously, they responded with Justin Verlander, but we'll get to that in a moment. Jacob deGrom, though, Texas, they are all over the place. They're trying to build something, but they don't really know where they're going, if you think about it, because they signed Corey Seager last year to a massive deal. They signed John Gray last year, who now will be the number 2 starter. They gave Martin Perez a qualifying offer worth about $30 million, I believe it was. Something insane, that amount, or $20 million or something along those lines. He accepted for obvious reason. And now Jacob deGrom is in there.
Simeon too.
Yeah, and Marcus Semien as well from a season ago. So sure, you've shored up the middle part of the infield, but you still have the corner spots. You've got the outfield, and you still have the bullpen. You still have the catcher spot. You still have so much to figure out. And this seems to me like it's almost still like you're in the retooling stage. You're not in the rebuilding stage anymore. You're in the retooling stage where you're still trying to find pieces to put around here. And sure, Jacob deGrom, but at age 34, though, time's running out.
Yeah. The way I think about this is just on the high risk, high reward end. First off, that's my first reaction.
Yeah.
As much as deGrom is heralded, and he's one of the best pitchers of our generation, the number is insane. The numbers that he's been putting up is insane and whatnot. But we spoke about this during the season when he was first coming back for the Mets off injury. How injured he's been the last couple of years does not seem to get talked about often enough. And you think that's going to slow down anytime soon into his 30s? Good money would bet that it's going to keep on continuing. So, I mean, it's a really high risk for Texas. The amount of financial commitment over the next 5 years that they're giving to him, and you really hope that it's going to take a massive 180-degree turn, that he's going to be completely clean bill of health, going 20-25 starts, absolute ace-like stuff, and all that. I understand wanting to take that risk because he's been, when he pitches, he's been unhittable. But, man, he's been so injured. If it keeps up, if the current trend of the last couple of years keeps up, man, that contract is going to be an absolute albatross. And if it does, maybe if you're a Mets fan, I mean, listen, as much as it hurts, look, as Yankee fans, how much it would have hurt just emotionally. Forget about taking the logic of the numbers and everything. God forbid Judge had left, how much it would have hurt just emotionally. You've been attached to him the last couple of years, all that sort of stuff. So imagine for Met fans, you lost deGrom, who for a large part felt like the heart and soul of the fan base. How good he was as a pitcher for them, and all that sort of stuff. And but at the same time, maybe as hard as it is to see right now, you look past emotion. Maybe you get away with one and don't have to deal with an absolute albatross of a contract and a great star pitcher late into his 30s who can't see the field at all. The Mets the Mets have a lot of work to do, but they're a team that won 101 games last year, and Jacob deGrom only started 6 of them. Mm-hmm. Like, as much as great as he is and whatnot, the team can survive without him, and I think we'll get to it, but I think they pivoted beautifully to sign Verlander for a shorter term, and a guy who, yeah, he's coming off of Tommy John at a very old age, but was completely healthy last year and back to his dominant self.
Yeah. And and not only that too, but also his postseason experience. He's got that experience with Max Scherzer as well from their time in Detroit together when they were youngsters. I don't have the picture, Mike, but we've seen it all over social media. Back in 2013, when both Verlander and Scherzer were with Detroit, they both made the All-Star game in Queens. That was the big picture going around as well for a lot of the time. But yeah, you hit the nail right on the head, I think, there with DeGrom. High risk, high reward. There's a lot of things going around there. We don't know what their direction is as well. And granted, yes, obviously everyone's direction is the World Series, but in what window, what time frame, and that's, I think, the big thing too. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, one other thing that, obviously today, just wrapped up maybe, 2 hours or so ago or something, DeGrom had his introductory press conference. I thought it was very interesting the way, describing his move and this and that, I guess sort of what he's willing to reveal or things like that.
Yeah.
Well, the vision that he was sold on the Texas Rangers and winning the World Series and all that, I was just like, what? Like, this is a team that finished, 25 games out of first place, despite all the huge financial commitments that they've made. Marcus Semien did not, like, it looks like that was a complete overpay.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't carry over his Toronto Blue Jays performance.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Seager was good, but, he, at one point, he's in the home run derby, all-star game, and, the rest of the team around him wasn't that great, all that sort of stuff. So it's a team that needs a lot of work. You're telling me about a vision for a World Series? Let's walk before we run.
Yeah.
And you could argue that the Mets are a lot closer to the World Series than the Texas Rangers are, even though they were a disappointing first round exit. So that answer, just that little quote, really scratched my head, because the language coming from DeGrom the entire lead up to the offseason was looking to remain a Met. We'll see what happens, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, kind of quick. See you later, New York. Don't worry about my Hall of Fame career, and you would have had a surefire retirement of my jersey. That's okay. I'll just go back home and play for a team that, absolutely was out of it in early July.
Yeah. And, looking back to some of the quotes that he said in his introductory press conference this afternoon, Mike, we were in contact with the Mets, end quote. New quote, the Rangers did a great job with constant communication and making me feel like they really wanted me here, end quote. Now, we know, obviously, that Steve Cohen has a lot of George Steinbrenner tendencies because he's got the money for it, for starters. His general manager, Billy Epler, went out, and I would assume, if, let's be honest here, Steve Cohen said, offer what do you got to do? Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Keep it, whatever. Do what you got to do to replace him. No lost feeling, no hard feelings.
Yeah.
We keep moving forward. Do you feel at all that the Mets really downgraded at all after they signed Justin Verlander to a 2-year, $86.6 million deal with an option for year number 3 worth $35 million?
This may be unpopular, but I honestly think they upgraded just because he's been more available on the field. And we'll see if that continues. Obviously, next year would be his second year coming off of Tommy John. But, I mean, all the indications, he looks perfectly fine, like, aging like fine wine. The Tommy John didn't affect him as badly as we thought. We thought, Tommy John surgery at his age would be a career ender. He came back and was absolutely instrumental, most of the way, won the Cy Young, I think, this year.
Mm-hmm.
Was brilliant in the Astros playoff run and finally got his first win in a World Series. A win in a game in a World Series, obviously won the title eventually. So yeah, I think it may sound unpopular, but I think they honestly upgraded because of how injured Jacob deGrom has been, and I will give the Mets credit. They absolutely pivoted. They really pivoted well. You lose the franchise really in deGrom, and they pivoted really quickly to get another all-time great pitcher in Justin Verlander. You don't have to be burdened by an extremely long financial commitment, whether that's in money or years, 2 years and whatnot. Yeah, you could say, oh, the Mets have a pretty aging rotation and this and that, but you can counter that with they have a lot of experience, and there's still time in the offseason to add to that. And with Cohen's spending habits, I think he would certainly do that. So yeah, I honestly think they even upgraded if anything.
Okay, that is definitely a hot take. So, this is something else too, Mike, is that we remember, of course, go back to Texas for a moment. Um, the Texas Rangers signed someone else that is very, very, very popular here in the New York area. Left-handed pitcher Andrew Heaney to a 2-year, $25 million contract with an opt-out after 2023. Listen to this
Yeah, that
starting
screams
five.
World Series.
Oh, it does. It does. Now listen to this starting five if folks have time. So you've got Jacob deGrom, you've got John Gray. The Rangers traded for the Braves right-handed pitcher Jake Odorizzi. Martin Perez also opted into that qualifying offer. And then Andrew Heaney is your number 5. Mike, do you like that at all after going 68 and 94 a season ago?
Again, it's really predicated on health.
Yeah.
So if it's healthy, that's a pretty solid rotation. It's not as terrible where it's where everybody's gonna meme about them and this and that and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, if everybody, it could turn really ugly. Again, it could be a situation. DeGrom's really injured again. He gets injured in spring training, things like that. Isn't available for most of the year, and they're having to piece it together, all that sort of stuff. So if everybody's healthy, it could go pretty well. Let's not forget Martin Perez was pretty damn good last year.
He
Um,
was. He
and
was.
I think I don't know how far he is away, but there's always been illusions that Jack Leiter might be a fast riser, and he might be waiting in the wings. So who knows if he would be a difference maker later on in the year. So yeah, I think if a lot's predicated on health, but if health is good, it could be a pretty solid 5.
So we look at the other signings, major signings around Major League Baseball, Mike. Los Angeles, the Dodgers signed Clayton Kershaw to a 1-year, $20 million deal. Philadelphia signed Taijuan Walker. We will have a specific segment for Philadelphia in a few short moments. Philadelphia signed Taijuan Walker to a 4-year, $72 million deal. Hilarious. So you've got that one there. Cleveland, the Guardians, they signed first baseman Josh Bell to a 2-year, $33 million deal, opt out after 2023. I know you are a fan of that deal. We brought up how the Yankees signed Tommy Kahnle to that 2-year, $11.5 million deal. Texas, we brought up about Andrew Heaney. The Cubs, they signed Cody Bellinger to a 1-year, $17.5 million prove-it contract with a mutual option for 2024. The Cubs, you brought up, Mike, about Jameson Taillon, a 4-year, $68 million deal. He finally gets the cash that he deserves after having so many injury issues out in Pittsburgh. And obviously, the Yankees traded for him to pretty much get the most out of him, and high risk or I guess low risk, high reward, if you will, since you didn't really trade much for him, but here. This is, I would call it medium risk, high reward if Jameson Taillon can kind of pair up with Marcus Stroman if he can get out of his own way. Stroman, that is. San Francisco, they signed Mitch Haniger to a 3-year, $45.5 million deal with an opt-out after 2024. And for those that also do not know, Mike, I'm sure you've heard this too. San Francisco, they were looking for both Haniger and Judge. So this was still a part of their trajectory anyway. They were going to sign Haniger either way, and they were still looking to add on Judge in addition to Haniger. So they got him there. St. Louis, they replaced Yadier Molina with Wilson Contreras to a 5-year, $87.5 million deal. A lot of question marks on that one, especially where his defense has been a little porous. But we'll have to wait and see there if, again, a lot, very, very, very deep shoes to fill Contreras with Yadier Molina for so many years. Boston signed Kenley Jansen to a 2-year deal worth $32 million. The Mets, they got another starter. They signed left-handed pitcher Jose Quintana to a 2-year, $26 million deal. Pirates legend Jose Quintana, that is. And then also Boston. Now, for those that do not know this name, you're definitely going to be getting to know this name. They signed outfielder Masataka Yoshida to a 5-year, $90 million deal. Now, for those that don't know, 7 years in the NPB, 326 batting average, 135 home runs, 474 ribbies. He's 29 years old. He's got a slugging percentage in the last 7 years, rather, of a 538, a 419 on base percentage, and 900 total hits. Also, Boston had paid the posting fee of $15.375 million to the Japanese league. And then also just this morning, we found out and we woke up to the news, Mike, that San Diego signed shortstop Xander Bogaerts to an 11-year, $280 million deal. And we know that John Heyman, John Morosi, Ken Rosenthal, a lot of these guys, they were talking about how the shortstop and Boston, the talks were heating up and things were moving quick. Not the case. He spurned Boston out in San Diego. It's a big deal. And then also we brought up about Judge. Philadelphia, they also signed Trey Turner to that 11-year, $300 million deal to take over at shortstop. Mike, out of all those deals, aside from Aaron Judge and aside from the ones that we spoke about, is there a specific one that you like or potentially don't like?
I don't like the Taijuan Walker deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I don't think anyone does.
In terms of the money, I think it fills out their rotation solidly if we want to talk about on paper and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, if you're every other GM, you're like, oh my God, what did you do, Dave Dombrowski? Just absolutely broke the market. What's that come out to? Oh, nearly $20 million a year on an annual value or something like that. I stink at math. It was a 4 year 72, you said? So
yeah 4 years 72, so a little bit, so about
for a
4 times
number
2 is
4
8, so it's
starter,
about,
I mean,
so it's a little bit under 20.
yeah, I mean, for a number 4 starter who he seems to always fall off in the second half after being an absolute god and unbelievable in the first half. So it kind of feels really strange
About
to give
13 million. I'm sorry to interrupt you. About 13.5, 14 million, because 15 times 4 is 75. So there you go. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So maybe not as bad as I thought, but
I'm sorry, 60. I'm sorry. So no. So hold on. Let's do our math here. So hold on one second. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but hold on. Now we have to do our math here. 72 divided by 4, 18 million. There you go.
18. Yeah, I was gonna say we're definitely close to 20. So yeah, 18. That's a lot for a number 4 pitcher.
Yep.
And especially one who he's had plenty of an inconsistency in New York. Like I mentioned, the second half collapses, all that sort of stuff. That's a deal that, like, my God, like the money is absolutely bad there. But I guess you had to balance it out with the pretty good signing of Trey Turner. That, my God, that Philadelphia Phillies lineup has the potential to be absolutely insane this upcoming year. I thought the Yoshida deal was kind of weird because the biggest knock on him, I think, with the scouting was that he isn't that great with defense. Oh, so Fenway Park should be an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Playing the field there. So that's going to be quite an adjustment to not only a guy who obviously hasn't played in Boston, who hasn't played on an MLB field yet, and to have gotten the pretty big contract that he did for, an international signing right away. I mean, boy, there's a lot of expectation there to live up to. And we know just the nature of international hitters coming over to Major League Baseball. He's not going to hit those exact numbers. I think,
Right.
It's not going to be these ungodly numbers of 330, 135 home runs in a 3-year span or something like that. It would be solid numbers. But I just think that's a big numbers that he was signed to, plus the posting fee. So it comes out to $100 million for a guy who hasn't seen an MLB field yet. And of course, the defensive issues. So I think there's going to be a lot of expectation and then a lot of adjustment. So that could be an interesting couple first months for Yoshida if things don't exactly you know if he doesn't exactly how do I want to say it, set the world on fire and right away.
Right.
So that was an interesting one. I thought the Red Sox finally did well to recognize what a bullpen is so far in the offseason. Even if it's Jansen, even if it's overpaying a little bit for an older star and all that sort of stuff, I think they'll finally have some semblance of stability and some more options in the bullpen. And probably this finally moves. Oh man, I just blanked. Yankees legend. Stupid decision from Cashman, choosing Brooks Christie over him. Why am I forgetting this? Garrett.
Hold on one second. I'll find him for you. I'll be honest with you. I don't know off the top of my head who.
Yeah, I'm totally blanking on it. It's Garrett something.
Hold on, let's see. I will tell you right now. Garrett Whitlock.
There we go, Garrett Whitlock. So that probably moves him to the rotation, which he's been such a good pitcher for Boston since they snagged him from the Yankees in the Rule 5 draft.
Yep.
And it really helps out their rotation moving in there. As much as he's been a good bullpen weapon, that's been out of necessity putting him there. So you gain some more depth to the bullpen and whatnot. You put him over there, and you're able to move him now to the rotation. That helps a lot in Boston.
I'm very intrigued to see what goes on with Yoshida, because do you move Verdugo? Because Verdugo, you'd figure would be left field. You've got Kike Hernandez in center. We've seen Christian Arroyo play a little bit in right. So now we would expect probably the corner outfield. And again, to put Yoshida in left field over there to start, especially with the green monster behind him. Woo!
Yeah.
Woo, that's tough. That's real tough.
You're talking about fan pressure, the contract and everything. And if it starts, bad defensively for him, I mean, you're talking about some serious fan pressure quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now obviously with Boston, I think that their retooling is, I believe, close to done, if not done already. We will see where that goes over there. But my last thing here with Major League Baseball, though, looking back at the Philadelphia signing, with Philadelphia signing Trey Turner, this has Dave Dombrowski written all over it. And the same thing goes with, or actually, I think the Taijuan Walker deal has Dave Dombrowski written all over it. And I think he did a good job, though, even though I'm a very big critic of Dombrowski because of what he's done in Boston, what he did in Detroit. Reminds me of LeBron James, where he goes to a certain city, a certain team, strips everything of what they've got, and then he gets fired and leaves, or he just picks up and leaves. It's the difference, obviously, between Dave Dombrowski and LeBron James is that LeBron just picks up and leaves, right? Dave Dombrowski, he just gets fired because he simply guts a team's farm system, and then he goes, he moves forward. It's not great, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I think, again, what Philadelphia did with Trey Turner was solid because they this is probably the best shortstop that they've seen since Jimmy Rollins. This is really the only shortstop that they've seen since Jimmy Rollins. And they shore that up there. And I think in the beginning I looked at it, I was like, oh, maybe he'll move back to second base since they've got Bryson Stott there. I'm like, no, you're not giving 11 years to a second baseman. It's not going to happen. He's going to be over at short, and, they'll eventually have to move Bryson Stott over to second. Alec Baum will stay at third, but nice job though by Dave Dombrowski, because if you think about it, right, every single time that the Mets signed a player or whatever it was, Philadelphia came right back and signed someone else. So, that's something that I'm really pumped to see what Steve Cohen counters back with after the Taijuan Walker signing. And also, too, Zach Eflin, too. He was signed by Tampa, the largest free agent contract ever given in a Tampa Bay uniform. I think it was 3 years, $40 million or something like that.
Oh my, earth shattering.
I think so. Well, yeah, especially because I know Wander Franco, he got the at the time the biggest contract in terms of money, but I don't know. I believe it's AAV. I think it's average annual value that Tampa was, or I guess eclipsed that with Zach Eflin. So they replace him with Walker, and they move over Bryson Stott to second and Trey Turner at short, and they say goodbye to Jean Segura. So that's it with Major League Baseball for now, Mike. Let's keep moving forward here. We've got about another 20 minutes left. Alongside Mike Szabo over there, Joey Jarzynka here with you on the Eastern Observer. Episode number 103 of the Primetime Rundown, presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Be sure to download their newest hit song, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us, on Apple Music, Spotify, and every single place that music is sold. Mike, let's go to St. John's and DePaul. The Big East Conference opener last night featured a real fun battle. And of course, we had an instant reaction for that with myself, with you as also with Dan Stack as well from wearedepaul.com, the senior writer there too, and our good friend of the program. Mike, we brought up how both teams, we figured it was going to be closer than what it was here. It was a 19-point win for St. John's, 86-67. And it was, of course, Joel Soriano who simply just took the world by storm and was able to take full advantage of that post play that DePaul simply had no answer for, because they're missing their two biggest guys down low.
Yeah, and now Soriano, now with his NCAA leading 8th double-double of the year, he's having a really strong year.
Crazy.
It's been well documented, but you got to give hats off of how he's continued to improve ever since he's transferred over. The work that he's done to continue to improve his physique, obviously, and adjusting to the system with Mike Anderson, where he has to run up and down the floor so much. So he's done really well in continuing to develop himself, and he's breaking out this year. 8 double-doubles in 10 games. This is absolutely fantastic stuff, what he's doing. And like you said, took full advantage of the injuries for DePaul, the height advantage that he had in the front court. Although I will say, for a time, Deshaun Nelson, for a couple of stretches in the game, did a pretty solid job on Soriano. Just the rest of the DePaul offense couldn't respond to bring the game really close. At one point, I think it got down to 9 or whatever, but never really got seriously close to be a competitive contest. So yeah, a fantastic performance by Soriano there. Like you said, 17 and 14. I thought DePaul would score a little more, given the fact of, they like to play similarly to St. John's, run up and down the floor. You saw really bad defense by St. John's against Iowa State. Weekend, especially on the inside. I think it was on the Seeing Red podcast, Troy Muriel, where he pointed out the field goals charts, the field goal stats, the spray charts for Iowa State in the second half. They only had 2 made field goals outside of the paint.
Yeah.
Everything was inside. So you thought, yeah, okay, they were going to shore it up, but it was still going to be a little bit of the same against DePaul. And I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a track meet than it was. Although I did correctly guess the amount of St. John's points. So I was halfway there. 86, hit it right on the head. So I will pat myself on the back a little bit.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, it was pretty much the most convincing win of the year, I would say, for St. John's. All 5 starters in double figures. You liked what you saw from in most stretches. 50% from the field shooting. Rafael Pinzon, I think, did a solid job as well, trying to and especially filling in for Mathis in the second half, really trying to solidify himself as this sixth man, first guy off of the bench for St. John's and whatnot. So interesting to see how that develops as he continues to try and build some rhythm out of a college career that he's just been so riddled with injuries. So a really good way to start off Big East play. You got two more non-conference games to finish out, before you really get full on into conference play the rest of the year. So yeah, real good wire to wire dominating win for St. John's, fired on all cylinders, and interesting to see them continue to build on it. A game they should win at home against New Hampshire on the weekend, and then you got a week off, and then you got Florida State in a game that you thought Florida State would have, record-wise, would have been a lot better this year than what they've turned out to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Florida State, they're another team that they lost to Siena. They're really tough. But I wouldn't be surprised, I'll be honest with you, if St. John's loses that game down at Florida Live Arena down in about, I think, was it 9 days, 11 days, something like that, give or take. I think it's next Saturday.
Yep.
So 9 days, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, this St. John's team yesterday, I was there. We got a chance to see it, of course, live. Both myself, Dan, and Dan Stack, we were sitting next to each other. We were talking about a lot, really, of what St. John's just brings, and David Jones too is really coming into his own. He's been fantastic, and he's been pretty quiet throughout his time there, because Joel Soriano has really taken the bull by the horn and pretty much been taking away all the spotlight from David Jones, which is kind of a good thing, because I know there's so many people and St. John's folks that wanted David Jones to pretty much replicate what Julian Champagny has done for so many years with St. John's. But now with David Jones kind of playing that backseat role a little bit, kind of that complimentary role, Joel Soriano simply leading the offense and leading the defense as well, with a couple of blocks to David Jones, 11 points, 8 boards, 5 of 12 from the floor. Posh Alexander did have he didn't have a great night last night. 4 of 13 points, quiet 13 points, but did have 3 steals, though, 6 boards, 6 assists. But Andre Curbelo, though, man, 7 for 9 from the floor, 15 points. He did have 6 turnovers, though, 3 steals. Again, he's in the top 5 in steals. But Montez Mathis, that's another one, because he got hurt, Mike. He got hurt. They're calling it a right ankle injury. So that's definitely something that we'll have to keep our eye out for. But also on the DePaul side of things, though, Javen Johnson, we know all about his capabilities, but they shut down Emoja Gibson, which was really big. 1 for 6 from the floor, 1 of 5 from distance, 3 points, 2 assists, but he also had 3 fouls before the first half was over. So that was a big deal too. That took him out of the offense. That took him pretty much out of everything. But then they were able to find some semblance from freshman Zion Cruz, 6 of 12, 14 points. He's really looked good. But then also Deshaun Nelson, too, another player, 6 of 6 from the floor, 13 points, 9 boards. So that was nice, too, to see there for DePaul. I think that DePaul is going to be a team to watch out for come the rest of conference play, and come, I think, March, when they get Nick Ongenda back, as well as Yor and I back, because then they'll be able to compete with the Bates, with the Sonogos, with the Sorianos again. I think that it's going to be pretty much a dogfight down the stretch with a lot of these teams too. And I think obviously I made a tweet, and I think I don't know if you saw that yesterday, but unpopular opinion, Mike, I'm looking forward to seeing Joel Soriano and Adama Sonogo. I don't know if that's just me saying, oh my goodness, this man has what it takes, Joel Soriano, to kind of play to his level. I don't know about that. I think that's tough. But I think, though, I don't know. It's going to be tough. Well, Mike, you do have some breaking news here. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so breaking news. Thanks to my friends telling me about this as I'm looking over Just checking Twitter now, going quickly back to baseball. Brandon Nimmo has just re-signed with the Mets, 8 years, 162 million.
Okay, so now with that being said, there was a lot of chatter. Mike, about that. That potentially Nimmo would be a Yankees signing if Judge were to bolt. This is about, I think, just by looking at some of the numbers here, according to John Heyman. Again, it's not Arson Judge, so it is Brandon Nimmo. Jeff Passan also says here too, 8 years, $162 million. So their center fielder, the biggest contract, biggest payroll in baseball officially gets bigger. 8 years, $162 million. We'll pivot away from FIFA for a few short moments here. What do you think of this deal? I personally think I love it. I love this deal.
Yeah, I mean, he as much as you feel like, you thought at one point it was going to get to like 25-ish, kind of AAV and all that sort of stuff, which I thought was sort of creeping a little high. But I think 20 AAV is pretty nice for how good he was. So let's not forget, he was a really good leadoff batter for them. What was it, 270 average this year? He has 15 to 20 homer potential. Yeah, he was, 5 wins above replacement this year. Really good, has developed to be such a good center fielder for them. Really good defensively out there. And we talked about how beforehand the Mets had such an issue with locking down center field, whether it was supposed to be Yoenis Cespedes, then he had all the injuries and whatnot that wound up to be so meme-worthy on the internet. And now they've locked down Brandon Nimmo. They've locked down their center fielder. So really solid bat, really good top of the order bat for them. Really good deal to bring him back.
So let's keep moving forward here. Our last segment, we're going to scrap National Hockey League talk tonight. Mike, we've got some FIFA World Cup stuff to break down here. So we're not going to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo because we were going to talk about some Portugal stuff, but we do have a couple of things that we've got to break down here in terms of grievances. So, Mike, the U.S. men's national team, they fell in the round of 16, 3-1 to the Netherlands on Saturday, about 5 days ago. Their head coach, Greg Berhalter, he is right now set to go in terms of contract talks with the U.S. Soccer Federation, and it looks as if that those negotiations have started. Well, let me tell you something. This is Mike right now trying to stop those talks right now. He's trying to stop it, and he's trying to yell at everyone saying Berhalter should be the head coach moving forward. But here are those grievances that Mike Szabo has as he closes out our main portion of the program.
Yeah, so, man, where do I start? Let us put it this way. I think it was a pretty good World Cup for the U.S. They got out of, there was so much goodwill, especially the England game. The joke was how many goals were they going to lose to against England, and all the English journalists and former players earlier were like, it's going to be 3-4 nothing, and run up the score. Then England racked up 6 against Iran in their opening match and all that sort of stuff. The U.S. played really well against England, and it's a result that would have looked a lot better if they would have closed out the Wales game and won that one. But nonetheless, they didn't. But either way, they still got the win. They still advanced out of the group, and the Netherlands game, it was really a game that showed where the U.S. really is. As much progress has been made, there's still a ways to go to really want to solidify their upward trajectory and want to be contenders on the world stage. I think this was a game where they showed they have a lot of work to do to get there, because you saw in the first 10 minutes before the first goal came in, they were dominating. They had the early chance by Christian Pulisic that was saved really well. Netherlands come the other way. You have a mental mistake. You're down 1-0. It was 3 mental mistakes from the defense that wound up costing them a kind of weird, lucky goal to have made it 2-1 at the time and gave them some hope.
Right.
But the Netherlands just punished them on the other end. They had 3 bad mental mistakes. And then they had some chances, couldn't finish it off, or they just had really good goalkeeper play from Norbert, who it's 6'8" frame, which is ridiculous for a goalkeeper at time.
Yeah.
But that's that game. Overall, it's a good World Cup in the sense that you went from 4 years ago not being in the field at all to this time, getting out of your group, getting to the round of 16. But the other part is it's just pulling teeth sometimes. When you watch it, there's such incredible potential with the youth of these kids. You haven't seen any sort of time in U.S. soccer history where you've had this deep of a player pool, this young, this amount of talent playing in the top leagues in Europe. The development is just at such a high, and it seems like it can only get better from here on out. And I question Greg Berhalter's squad selection that he had coming into this World Cup. We could spend eons on that. I think he could have done better. This team's most glaring need is a number 9 striker, and I think he left some guys home that shouldn't have been left home. Instead, he wound up bringing 4 right backs on the plane, and he only used 2 of them, or he used 3, which one of them shouldn't have even been used. That's a whole nother thing. But 4 right backs on a 26-man squad is just that's just poor squad management. No clue what's going on there. So there's that, and then the in-game tactics. The substitutions, I think some of them were just really poor given the situation at the current time. We could go eons on nitpicking each one. And then if you saw, just take the Iran game, for example. They're up 1-0. They were relatively dominant in terms of possession or whatnot. And they're holding on to their dear life at the end of the game and all that sort of stuff. I understand you can't press for 90 minutes. You can't execute certain tactics for 90 minutes and whatnot. But, I mean, come on. You can't go that night and day in your performance and absorbing that much pressure and that much, desperate defending and whatnot was just absolutely ridiculous. So some of the in-game tactics is ridiculous. So I'll put it this way. I think the best analogy for the U.S. men's national team under Greg Berhalter is like the Rangers with David Quinn. Like, yes, we could make, there's our own grievances about how the Rangers team is this year and Gerard Gallant and all that sort of stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. But we always felt that the Rangers during Quinn, they had talent there, but there was always something kind of holding them back. They could be better, all that sort of stuff. It kind of feels like that with the U.S. national team with Berhalter. Yes, there's been progress. Yes, he's overseen some really good young talent. They won a bunch of trophies in CONCACAF last year. They beat Mexico 3 times in a calendar year, which they hadn't done in 70 years. There's been good moments, but sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. They're playing, whether it's playing style or whatnot, they always seem to be really bad on the road at creating chances, finishing off those chances, creating goals. So and you kind of feel like they're going to stagnate from here on out. The question is, you're going into 2026. You are hosting the World Cup. There's talks now that they could be participating as well as hosting Copa America, which of course is a major continental tournament. South African, South American teams, and the amount of talent there as well. You're talking about the Brazils, the Argentinas, and whatnot. So this is a critical period for U.S. soccer. And you don't want this period to start stagnating. And so the question has to be, how much farther can Greg Berhalter take us? We don't want things to stagnate and whatnot. And I have a lot of questions surrounding it. I mean, just to begin with, he kind of got hired in a very controversial way, which, again, I can go all day on this, but That's really my grievances with him. The other part of it is I don't know who you would bring in, what would be your best choice, and whatnot. But I don't know. It just feels like you're gonna be okay, but not great with him.
Well, okay, that was your grievance there for Greg Berhalter. So
Got it all.
you got it all. You got it all out there. Exactly. So with that being said, our main portion of the show has concluded. Let us get to our kudos. Mike Szabo, you are up first.
Well, kudos. Sticking with the FIFA World Cup, let's give kudos and credit to the Morocco national team, and this run during the World Cup, man, has just been so fantastic. Getting out of a group with Belgium and Croatia, and then going up against Spain in the round of 16, who many had as a World Cup favorite, who beat Costa Rica 7-0 in their opening match. They looked really strong and whatnot. They win on penalty shootouts, and now will take on Portugal in the quarterfinals. I mean, hats off to this Morocco team and what they've done. This is a team that they fired their head coach. Now, take note, USA, take note. They fired their head coach 5 months before the World Cup because he had a problem with some of the star players that Morocco had to offer, didn't want to select them, all that sort of stuff. The federation said, that's not going to happen. They get rid of him. They bring these guys in. The players have bought in. There's such a belief. There's such momentum with them, and they go on this run. They haven't lost yet. They did not lose in the group stage. They wound up, upsetting Spain in the round of 16, and I think they got as good a shot. They got a puncher's chance to take down Portugal.
That could definitely be pretty good there, if that does happen, because we didn't talk a lot about Cristiano Ronaldo's squad, and is he still the face of Portugal? We'll have to wait and see. My kudos goes to Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman Chris Letang, who suffered a second stroke in his life. Couple of weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, he suffered his second stroke. And Mike, he's listed as day-to-day. He's listed as day-to-day, and he's skating with the team. Now, that's my kudos because he's resumed practicing with Pittsburgh, and he's listed as day-to-day. And after a stroke, I would be thinking about my life. And this man is thinking about hockey. My kudos goes out to Chris Letang, but also a blessing goes out to Chris Letang too, because you, sir, are one of a kind. Because not only you have accomplished literally everything. You've got 3 Stanley Cups. Number 58 will be lifted to the rafters inside PPG Paints Arena in a few years. Nothing more you have to accomplish, but he's a hockey lifer. It's amazing how these hockey guys are built. But again, second stroke, my kudos goes out to Chris Letang on being day-to-day. Seriously, this is and about a month or about a few weeks after he suffered it. Crazy, crazy stuff. Well, with that being said here, ladies and gentlemen, our show is concluded. We cannot thank you enough for making us a part of your Thursday evening. We will be back with you in our normal time slot next Friday night, December 16th, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But before that, on Tuesday, December 13th, join our guys, Al Carl, John DeConi, John Smith, and Gary Mehefe as they bring you a recap of the world of wrestling presented to you by ProWrestlingPick'em.com right here on the Eastern Observer. Well. One more we've got. One more, folks. Be sure to subscribe to the Primetime Rundown by searching the name of our show on Google Podcasts, the Google Play Store, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and of course, if you'd like to see our beautiful faces, please search us on the Eastern Observer on YouTube. Same thing goes with our good friends from the Essential Wrestling Podcast. The entire thing perfect right there. Well, one final time, ladies and gentlemen, for Mike Szabo, I'm Joey Jarzynka. For all of us here at the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we will see you all next Friday night for another edition, episode 104 upcoming of the Primetime Rundown. So long, everybody.